I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 34 years old, and for 15 years my family believed I was the disappointment of our military dynasty. "Just pushing papers," my father would say, while my combat-ready siblings received medals and acclaim. Little did they know I was rising through classified ranks they couldn't imagine. Everything changed that day in Germany when my sister's commander approached us. His face transformed from friendly to shocked as recognition dawned. "Ma'am, you're the general?" My sister's jaw dropped as her world turned upside down. Before I tell you how I went from family disappointment to earning respect in the most unexpected way, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt underestimated. I promise, this story might just give you the courage you need. Growing up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, just outside Fort Bragg, meant military service wasn't just a career choice. It was our family legacy. The Mitchell name carried weight in military circles, something my father, Colonel James Mitchell, never let us forget. Our modest two-story home might have looked ordinary from the outside, but inside, it was practically a military museum. Shadow boxes displaying medals, flags carefully folded in triangular cases, and photographs of Mitchell men in uniform dating back to my grandfather in Korea. My mother, Margaret, had served as a military nurse for 20 years before retiring, to raise us 5 children. Though she wore civilian clothes now, her posture never lost that military precision, and our home ran with the efficiency of a well-organized battalion. My 3 older brothers seemed born ready for service. Alexander, the oldest, followed Dad into the Army Rangers, completing his first tour in Afghanistan before I finished high school. Michael joined the Marines, bringing a friendly rivalry to holiday dinners as he and Alexander compared physical training scores and deployment stories. Even Thomas, who we all thought might break tradition with his artistic talents, eventually commissioned into the Air Force, piloting fighter jets with the natural skill that made Dad beam with pride. Then there was Abigail, my younger sister, by 2 years. From the moment she could walk, she shadowed Dad, wearing his cap around the house and standing at attention whenever he entered a room. By high school, she had mapped out her entire military career: West Point, then infantry, following our father's exact path. Dad called her his legacy cadet, and Mom kept a special scrapbook just for Abigail's achievements. And then there was me. I wasn't uninterested in military service. Quite the opposite. I was fascinated by it, but in ways my family couldn't understand. While my siblings were captivated by weapon systems and combat tactics, I was drawn to the chess game behind conflicts. I spent hours in our local library reading about intelligence operations that had changed the course of wars without firing a single shot. "The pen is mightier than the sword," I once said at dinner, 16 years old and trying to explain my interest in military intelligence. Dad had laughed, not unkindly but dismissively. "The pen might be mighty, Becca, but it doesn't stop bullets. Real service happens on the front lines." That moment crystallized the division that would define my relationship with my family for years to come. They respected the visible, traditional paths of military glory. I was drawn to the shadows, to the quieter but no less crucial work of intelligence. When college application time came around, my siblings had applied to service academies or programs with ROTC scholarships. I chose Georgetown University to study international relations, specializing in security studies. Dad viewed it as a disappointment, though he tried to hide it. "Georgetown's a good school," he'd said, his tone suggesting otherwise. "And I suppose the military needs people doing paperwork too." Mom had been more diplomatic but equally transparent. "Couldn't you at least consider West Point? Just apply and see." I didn't tell them that I had already been recruited by representatives from military intelligence who had noticed my aptitude for languages and analytical thinking. My path was taking shape, just not in ways they could recognize or value. The real breaking point came during Thanksgiving break my junior year of college. I'd just accepted a conditional offer to join a specialized intelligence training program after graduation. Excited to finally share news that I thought might earn their respect, I announced it over turkey dinner. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Dad set down his fork. Intelligence work? That's not real service, Rebecca. That's desk work for people who can't handle the field. James? Mom cautioned, but her eyes held the same disappointment. What? She should know what she's signing up for, Dad continued, pushing papers while real soldiers put their lives on the line. Alexander, home between deployments, tried to mediate. Intelligence is important too, Dad. Sure it is, Dad conceded, but it's support. It's not the tip of the spear. The conversation deteriorated from there, culminating in Dad's cutting question. Do you even care about serving your country, Rebecca? Or just finding a comfortable office job with a government pension? I excused myself from the table, holding back tears until I reached the privacy of my childhood bedroom. That night, as I stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd placed on my ceiling years before, I made a private vow. I would succeed in my chosen path, with or without my family's blessing. I returned to Georgetown the next day instead of staying the full weekend. As the bus pulled away from Fayetteville, I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer seeking my family's approval. I was charting my own course, and someday, I promised myself, they would understand the value of the path I'd chosen. I just never imagined how many years and what extraordinary circumstances it would take for that day to come. My entry into military intelligence began with an intensive training program that made even Georgetown's rigorous curriculum seem easy by comparison. For 14 months, I lived and breathed intelligence tradecraft, language acquisition, and analytical methodologies. While my classmates from Georgetown posted vacation photos on social media, I disappeared into a world of classified briefings and 16-hour study days. Language had always come easily to me, but the program pushed me beyond what I thought possible. I mastered Farsi in 6 months, then began Arabic, picking up regional dialects that even native speakers found impressive. My instructors noted my unusual ability to detect patterns in seemingly random data, a skill that would later define my career. My first evaluation described me as possessing exceptional analytical capabilities and intuitive understanding of adversarial psychology. I sent a copy to my parents, hoping they might see what my instructors saw. Dad's response was a brief email. Glad you're doing well. Alexander just received his Bronze Star. We're having a family celebration next weekend if you can make it. I didn't make it. I was already being prepared for my first overseas assignment, a counterintelligence operation in Eastern Europe that required immediate deployment. When I called to explain my absence, Mom sounded disappointed but unsurprised. Your brothers and sister always find a way to make it home for important family moments, she said. The implication was clear. My priorities were wrong. What I couldn't tell her was that the operation I was supporting had direct implications for the safety of American troops, including potentially my own brothers. That became a recurring theme in my early career. My work often had direct, life-saving impacts that I could never discuss with my family. During my second year, I helped identify a previously unknown terrorist cell planning attacks on American military installations. The operation to neutralize the threat went flawlessly, saving potentially hundreds of lives. A senior officer personally commended me, saying my analytical work was the linchpin of the entire operation. That same month, Michael received a commendation for leadership during a training exercise. My parents threw him a party. I saw the photos on my mother's social media. The entire family gathered around a cake decorated with the Marine Corps' emblem. I was in a secure facility thousands of miles away, unable to even mention what I'd accomplished. The pattern continued as years passed. Each family gathering became an exercise in deflection and discomfort. My brothers would share sanitized versions of their deployments. Abigail, who had indeed followed Dad to West Point and was now rising through Army ranks, would enthusiastically discuss her training and assignments. When the conversation turned to me, I had little I could share. "Still enjoying your office job?" Dad would ask. "Yes, it's challenging and rewarding," I would respond, unable to elaborate. "Well, that's good. Not everyone is cut out for real. Military work?" he'd say, not unkindly but with unmistakable dismissal. "We need support staff too." The gap between my family's perception and my reality grew wider with each promotion and successful operation. By my 5th year in service, I had already been promoted ahead of schedule twice, achievements that happened behind classified doors. The irony became increasingly painful. The more successful I became in my field, the more my family viewed me as the underachiever. After a while, I simply stopped sharing any career developments with them. What was the point? Abigail's commissioning ceremony epitomized the divide. The entire family gathered at West Point, bursting with pride as she received her 2nd lieutenant bars. Dad, now retired but still standing military straight, beamed as he gave her her first salute. My brothers attended in full-dress uniforms, medals displayed. I wore a simple dark blue dress, feeling like an outsider at my own sister's milestone. "At least one of my daughters followed the family tradition," Dad said during his toast at dinner, not maliciously but carelessly. Mom squeezed my hand under the table, a small acknowledgement of the hurt his words caused, but said nothing to contradict him. That evening, alone in my hotel room, I received an encrypted message about my promotion to a position that placed me among the youngest officers of my rank in intelligence history. I celebrated by ordering room service ice cream and watching reruns on TV, thousands of miles from anyone who knew what the promotion actually meant. It was becoming clear that my family might never understand or value my contribution, and somehow, I needed to make peace with that reality. What my family couldn't see was that my career had taken an extraordinary turn. By my 7th year of service, I had been recruited into a special access program, the kind of classified operation that even most intelligence officers never know exists. My particular talents for pattern recognition and predictive analysis had caught the attention of the highest levels of military intelligence leadership. "Mitchell, you see connections that others miss," my new commanding officer told me during my briefing. "Where others see random data points, you see constellations. That's rare, and we need it." My security clearance was elevated to levels beyond top secret, requiring polygraphs every 6 months and restrictions on my personal life that made maintaining relationships outside work nearly impossible. But the work itself was the most challenging and rewarding I'd ever experienced. I developed a revolutionary methodology for identifying sleeper agents, individuals placed in strategic positions years before activation. My approach combined traditional intelligence gathering with advanced algorithms I designed, creating a system that could detect the nearly undetectable. The first major test of my methodology came when we uncovered a network that had infiltrated critical infrastructure systems across 3 continents. Working around the clock for 17 days straight, my team and I mapped the entire network, identifying 37 previously unknown operatives. The subsequent neutralization operation was conducted with surgical precision, with not a single American casualty. The Director of National Intelligence personally called to congratulate me. 3 months later, I received a promotion that typically required 15 years to achieve. I had done it in 8. My second major operation involved preventing an assassination attempt on a key diplomatic figure whose work was essential to maintaining peace in a volatile region. The intelligence was fragmentary at best, whispers and shadows that most analysts would have dismissed. But I saw the pattern, convinced my superiors to allocate resources, and we thwarted the attempt just 12 hours before execution. "You didn't just save one life today?" my commander told me afterward. "You potentially saved thousands who would have died in the conflict that would have followed." The third operation remains so classified that even now, I can only speak of it in the vaguest terms. It involved the protection of a technological asset vital to national security. The operation spanned 9 countries and required coordination, with intelligence agencies that rarely cooperated with each other. The success of this mission led to my most significant promotion yet, one that placed me in a position of authority unprecedented for someone my age. Through it all, my family remained oblivious. Their perception of me as the underachieving Mitchell continued unabated. During one Thanksgiving dinner, 3 weeks after I had returned from the technology protection operation, Dad asked if I had considered applying for advancement opportunities. "There's no shame in being ambitious, Rebecca," he said, cutting his turkey with military precision. "Even in administrative roles, you should push yourself." I nearly laughed at the irony but maintained my composure. "I'm satisfied with my career progression, Dad." "That's the problem," he replied, shaking his head. "Satisfaction leads to stagnation. A real soldier is never satisfied." Michael jumped in, trying to be helpful. "There are combat support roles that might suit you, Becca. I could put in a word." "Thanks, but I'm good where I am," I replied, the gulf between us never feeling wider. Mom, ever the peacemaker, quickly changed the subject to Abigail's upcoming deployment, her first major one as a captain. The family spent the rest of dinner discussing her assignment, the care packages they would send, and the prayer circle Mom was organizing at church. I sat quietly, knowing that Abigail's deployment was to a region where intelligence had recently identified increasing threats. I would likely spend the coming months working to ensure her safety from thousands of miles away, in ways none of them would ever know. That Christmas, I didn't go home at all. I sent gifts and made a brief video call, claiming work obligations prevented my attendance. In reality, I had just been briefed on my promotion to Brigadier General, making me among the youngest to achieve that rank in modern military history. The position came with command responsibilities that required immediate attention. As I sat alone in my apartment that Christmas night, surrounded by classified briefings rather than family, my secure phone rang. It was a call that would set in motion events that would finally bridge the chasm between my two worlds, though not in any way I could have anticipated. Abigail's deployment had been highly publicized within our family circle. Mom had created a special deployment countdown calendar, and Dad had pulled strings with old military contacts to get insider information on her unit's mission parameters. My brothers sent her tactical gear they swore would be useful, though much of it violated regulation protocols. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I had been briefed on intelligence regarding her deployment region 3, weeks before she even received her orders. As the commanding officer of a specialized intelligence division, I now oversaw all strategic intelligence for that particular area of operations. The region had been relatively stable when Abigail's deployment was planned, but intelligence is fluid and situations evolve rapidly. 6 weeks into her 6-month deployment, our surveillance algorithms detected unusual patterns of communication among known hostile elements. The chatter contained fragments of information suggesting knowledge of American patrol routes, Abigail's unit's patrol routes. I immediately reassigned our best analyst to the case, demanding hourly updates and redirecting satellite resources to provide enhanced coverage of the area. For 3 days, I barely left my secure office, catching naps on the small couch while waiting for new intelligence to process. On the 4th day, a pattern emerged that sent ice through my veins. What we were seeing wasn't just a localized threat. It was a coordinated effort to target American forces, with specific focus on the sector where Abigail's unit operated. Someone had compromised their operational security, and the enemy was preparing to exploit it. I called an emergency briefing with my intelligence team and representatives from Operational Command. "We have approximately 72 hours before they're in position for an attack," I informed the assembled officers, none of whom knew that one of the soldiers at risk was my sister. "I want options on my desk in 3 hours." For the next 2 days, I coordinated a multi-agency response while maintaining complete operational security. No one could know we had detected the threat, or we risked losing our advantage. I authorized the deployment of additional intelligence assets to the region and coordinated with special operations teams that could intervene if necessary. Sleep became a distant memory as I moved between secure calls, threat assessments, and strategy sessions. The faces of the soldiers in danger, including Abigail's, drove me forward through exhaustion. 60 hours into the crisis, we intercepted communications confirming our worst fears. The attack would come at dawn the following day, targeting a joint patrol that, according to the schedule I had accessed, would include Abigail's platoon. I faced an impossible choice. I could alert operational command to evacuate the patrol route, potentially exposing our intelligence sources and methods, or I could deploy a more surgical intervention that might preserve our intelligence advantage, but carried higher risk. After 20 minutes of deliberation with my senior staff, I made my decision. I would personally authorize and oversee a classified extraction operation, bringing in elements that officially didn't exist to evacuate the patrol before the attack, without alerting the enemy to our knowledge of their plans. "This is oversight," I said into the secure communication line, using my operational call sign. "I am implementing Protocol Nightshade, Authentication Code Sierra November 84 Delta." For the next 12 hours, I didn't leave the secure communications room, personally coordinating the extraction teams as they moved into position. The operation required synchronizing 5 different units across 3 branches of the military, none of whom knew the complete picture of what they were doing or why. At 0300 hours, 6 extraction helicopters approached the forward operating base where Abigail's unit was preparing for their dawn patrol. Their arrival was disguised as a routine supply delivery and personnel transfer. The base commander received sealed orders, authenticated by codes only I could authorize, directing an immediate tactical redeployment of all personnel scheduled for the dawn patrol. Through encrypted video feed, I watched as Abigail and her fellow soldiers boarded the helicopters, confusion evident on their faces but training, keeping them disciplined and responsive. 3 hours later, as dawn broke over the empty patrol route, our surveillance captured the enemy forces moving into what they thought would be a perfect ambush position. Instead, they found nothing but empty terrain. The operation was a complete success. 57 American soldiers, including my sister, had been extracted without a single casualty. The enemy forces, exposed in their ambush positions, were subsequently targeted by airstrikes, neutralizing the threat entirely. In the operation's aftermath, I received the highest commendation from the Joint Chiefs, though like so much of my work, it would remain classified and unacknowledged outside the most secure rooms in the Pentagon. What I didn't anticipate was that 3 of the extracted soldiers, including Abigail, had sustained injuries during an earlier mission and required medical evacuation to the military hospital in Landstuhl, Germany. As reports of their condition reached me, I made a decision that would change everything. "I need to be on the next transport to Germany," I told my executive officer. "Ma'am?" she questioned, surprised by the unusual request. "I'm going to personally debrief the affected personnel," I explained, the half-truth coming easily after years of compartmentalized communication. This extraction operation revealed a significant intelligence leak. I need first-hand accounts. Within 4 hours, I was on a military transport headed for Germany, not as a concerned sister, but as General Rebecca Mitchell on an official intelligence mission. Or so the paperwork said. In truth, I needed to see with my own eyes that Abigail was safe. For once, my personal and professional worlds were aligned in purpose, though neither my sister nor my family had any idea. The military hospital in Landstuhl, Germany, stood imposing against the gray winter sky as my transport arrived. I had visited many times before in my official capacity, but never with such personal stakes. Wearing my standard dark blue suit, rather than uniform, a common practice for intelligence officers to maintain lower profiles, I moved through security checkpoints with the efficiency of someone familiar with the protocols. I'm here to debrief personnel from Operation Nightshade. I informed the security officer, presenting my credentials. They were the type that opened doors without questions, and this time was no exception. Yes, ma'am. They're in the East Wing, 3rd floor. I made my way through the bustling hospital corridors, passing medical personnel and wounded soldiers. Each injured service member I passed represented both a failure and success of intelligence. We hadn't prevented their injuries, but our work helped prevent far worse outcomes daily. The weight of this responsibility had become familiar over the years, but seeing these soldiers, knowing Abigail was among them, made it feel heavier than usual. These weren't abstract assets on an intelligence brief. They were someone's children, siblings, spouses. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and approached the nurses' station. I'm here to speak with the personnel from yesterday's transport, I said, again presenting my credentials. The nurse nodded. They're in rooms 312 through 318. Most are awake and stable. Which room is Captain Mitchell in? I asked, maintaining my professional demeanor. 314, ma'am. She's awake and her condition is listed as stable. I thanked her and moved down the corridor, my heart beating faster despite my outward composure. I hadn't seen Abigail in nearly 8 months since her pre-deployment family dinner. Now she was here because of an operation I had personally commanded. Before I could reach room 314, I heard familiar voices from a small waiting area. Turning the corner, I saw Abigail sitting in a wheelchair, her right leg bandaged but otherwise appearing alert and well. She was speaking with a man I recognized immediately as Colonel James Wilson, her commanding officer. I had reviewed his file extensively during the extraction planning but had never met him in person. I paused, suddenly uncertain how to proceed. In all my careful planning, I hadn't prepared for this specific scenario, encountering my sister and her commander in an open area rather than the privacy of a hospital room. Before I could retreat and recalibrate my approach, Abigail looked up and saw me. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Rebecca? What are you doing here?" Colonel Wilson turned, his expression professionally neutral as he assessed the newcomer in civilian clothes. I moved forward, years of intelligence training helping me maintain my cover story. "I was in the area for work and heard about the incident. Thought I'd check on you." It was plausible enough. Many government employees passed through Ramstein, air base nearby, but Abigail looked skeptical. "In Germany? For your desk job?" Colonel Wilson extended his hand. "James Wilson, Abigail's CO. And you are?" "Rebecca Mitchell," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Abigail's sister." Something flickered across his face, a moment of confused recognition. "Mitchell," he repeated. "From—" I could see the mental connections forming as he processed my name and face. I had participated in several secure video briefings with theater commanders regarding regional intelligence. Though I typically remained unnamed on such calls, my face would be familiar to senior officers operating in the region. "We may have crossed paths professionally," I offered neutrally. His eyes narrowed, then suddenly widened as full recognition dawned. His posture straightened instinctively, years of military training taking over. "Ma'am, you're the general?" The question hung in the air. Abigail looked between us in confusion. "What general?" she asked. Colonel Wilson was still staring at me, his expression a mixture of shock and rapidly recalibrating respect. "Brigadier General Mitchell, from Strategic Intelligence Command." Abigail's jaw literally dropped. "What?" "No, this is my sister Rebecca. She works an administrative job at the Pentagon." Colonel Wilson shook his head slowly. "Captain Mitchell, your sister is— well, she's my superior officer, by several levels." I watched as Abigail's world visibly tilted on its axis. The sister she had dismissed for years as the family underachiever was suddenly revealed to be a general, and apparently one important enough to render her combat-hardened commander nearly speechless. "That's not possible," Abigail said. "She's not even in a combat branch. She's—" The reason you and your unit are alive right now, Colonel Wilson finished quietly. If I'm connecting the dots correctly. I maintained my composure, though internally I was scrambling to manage this unanticipated security breach. Colonel Wilson, I appreciate your discretion in this matter. Perhaps we could continue this conversation in private. He nodded immediately. Of course, General. I'll give you and your sister some privacy. As he turned to leave, he paused. And thank you, ma'am, for the extraction. We had no idea what hit us, just that suddenly we were being redeployed for unspecified security concerns. It wasn't until the strike reports came in that we realized what would have happened. After he left, Abigail and I sat in silence for several long moments. Her expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked surprisingly like hurt. 15 years, she finally said. For 15 years, we've all thought you were just pushing papers in some basement office. Dad said. She stopped herself, the implications of my actual role clearly sinking in. I know what Dad said, I replied quietly. What you all said. Why didn't you tell us? The question was barely above a whisper. I couldn't. Nearly everything I do is classified, still is. But a general? Rebecca, you're 34. How is that even possible? I smiled slightly. By being very good at what I do. The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd had in our adult lives. Under the constraints of security protocols, I explained as much as I could about my actual career, the specialized training, the operations I'd contributed to, and yes, my rapid rise through ranks that typically took decades to achieve. So all those times we were celebrating our deployments and medals, I was running operations that I couldn't talk about, I confirmed. Sometimes operations that directly protected you and our brothers. Abigail shook her head, processing this revelation. Does anyone in the family know? No one, not even Mom. And Dad. She was quiet for a moment. They should know. They need to know. It's complicated, Abby. Most of what I do. I'm not saying broadcast your classified operations, she interrupted. But they should know who their daughter actually is, what you've actually accomplished. Her eyes met mine, suddenly fierce, with protective determination I'd never seen directed toward me before. I'm calling them, today. 3 days later, I stood outside a private waiting room at Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Abigail had been transported there for follow-up treatment, providing the perfect pretext for a family gathering. Inside that room waited my parents, my 3 brothers, and Abigail, who had been sworn to secrecy about the specific nature of the family meeting. I had spent those 3 days securing the necessary clearances to disclose my rank and general position, if not the classified details of my work. It had required calls to the highest levels of military intelligence and signature on numerous non-disclosure agreements for my family. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my dress blue uniform, the first time I had worn it in my family's presence, and opened the door. The conversation inside stopped abruptly as I entered. 5 pairs of eyes widened almost comically as they took in my appearance. The general's stars on my uniform gleamed under the fluorescent lights, impossible to miss. Dad was the first to break the stunned silence. What the hell is this? His voice was tight, controlled anger evident in every syllable. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Rebecca? Alexander and Michael exchanged confused glances, while Thomas simply stared. Only Abigail watched with a small, satisfied smile. Hello, everyone, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. I believe we're overdue for a conversation. Dad stood, up, his face flushing. Is this some kind of joke? Where did you get that uniform? Do you have any idea how serious an offense impersonating an officer is, let alone a general? His accusation stung, even though I had anticipated it. Decades of military service had taught my father to respect the uniform above all else. In his mind, the only explanation for his paper-pushing daughter wearing general's stars was stolen, Valor, a concept so abhorrent to him that rage was his first reaction. "It's not impersonation, Dad," Abigail said firmly from her hospital bed. "She earned those stars." Dad shook his head dismissively. "That's impossible. She works in administration. She's never even served in a combat zone." "James," Mom interjected, studying my face with new awareness. "Let her explain." I stepped further into the room, maintaining the composure that had carried me through international crises and life-or-death operations. "I understand this is shocking. I'm prepared to answer your questions. But first, I need to establish that this is not a joke or impersonation. I am Brigadier General Rebecca Mitchell, Commanding Officer of the Strategic Intelligence Division, Special Access Programs." Dad's jaw clenched. "Prove it." Without a word, I handed him a sealed envelope containing verification documents signed by the Secretary of Defense, specifically prepared for this meeting. As he read, his expression shifted from anger to disbelief to something I couldn't quite identify. His hands, the same steady hands that had taught me to fish and tie knots as a child, trembled slightly. "This is authenticated," he finally said, looking up at me as though seeing a stranger. "But how? When?" "My promotion to Brigadier General came through last December," I explained. "But I've been working in military intelligence since I graduated from Georgetown. The administrative job was my cover." 15 years, Mom said softly. "You've been living a double life for 15 years?" Alexander leaned forward, his Ranger training evident in his focused attention. "Why the secrecy with us? We all have clearances." "Not high enough," I replied simply. "And compartmentalization is standard protocol." Michael, ever the practical one, asked, "So all those times we thought you were pushing papers?" "I was running counterintelligence operations, developing threat assessment protocols, and eventually commanding my own division," I completed his thought. Thomas whistled low. "Holy shit, Becca." "Language," Mom corrected automatically, then laughed at the absurdity of correcting her son's language while discovering her daughter was a general. Throughout this exchange, Dad had remained uncharacteristically silent, still holding the verification documents. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its anger, replaced by something that sounded almost like grief. "All these years," he said, "all these years I've been being an ass," Abigail finished for him, earning a sharp look from Mom and a surprised chuckle from our brothers. "Yes," Dad acknowledged, looking directly at me. "I have been. Dismissing your service, belittling your contributions." He set the papers down carefully. "I was wrong. Completely wrong." The admission, so unexpected from my proud father, momentarily left me speechless. In all my preparation for this meeting, I had anticipated continued disbelief, demands for explanation, even anger, but not this immediate acknowledgement. "You couldn't have known," I offered, feeling strangely protective of him despite years of hurt. "I should have," he countered. "A real leader evaluates based on available evidence, not preconceived notions. And the evidence was there. Your intelligence, your dedication. I chose to interpret it through my own narrow definition of service." He straightened his shoulders. "I failed you as a father and as a fellow service member." The room fell silent. In our family, with its military precision and structure, such admissions were rare. Mom broke the silence, asking the question that clearly troubled her most. "All. Those family gatherings you missed, the holidays you couldn't make at home, that wasn't really because of administrative work, was it?" I shook my head. "No. I was usually deployed or managing crisis operations." "While we were celebrating without you," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "Or worse, making you feel unwelcome when you could be there." The conversation continued for hours, moving from shock and apologies to more practical questions about my career and future. My brothers, after the initial surprise, transitioned into pride and a barrage of questions about intelligence work, most of which I couldn't answer. Mom moved between tears and fierce pride, occasionally touching my uniform, as if to verify it was real. Dad remained quieter than usual, processing the paradigm shift. When the others stepped out to find dinner in the cafeteria, he asked to speak with me alone. "I need you to know," he said once the door closed, "that while I'm incredibly proud of what you've accomplished, I'm deeply ashamed of how I've treated you. Dad." He held up a hand. "Please, let me say this. I've spent decades teaching young officers about leadership and respect, all while failing to show those qualities to my own daughter. There's no excuse for that. You were working with limited information," I offered. "No," he said firmly. "I was working with pride and prejudice. I decided what real service looked like, and I dismissed anything that didn't fit that model." He met my eyes directly. "I was wrong, and I am sorry." In that moment, something healed between us, not completely, but significantly. The validation I had stopped seeking years ago was finally being offered, not just for my rank or achievements, but with recognition of the hurt that had preceded it. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." 6 months after the revelation at Walter Reed, I stood in my parents' backyard, watching Dad carefully tend to the grill while Mom arranged platters on the picnic table. It was Memorial Day weekend, and for the first time in years, I had taken leave to join the family gathering without pretense or cover stories. The changes in our family dynamic were subtle but profound. The Mitchell military gatherings had transformed from showcases of combat achievements to celebrations of service in all its forms. Dad had replaced his wall of combat photographs with a more inclusive display that now included a framed picture of me receiving my general's stars, a private ceremony that had been photographed but previously kept classified. Alexander approached, handing me a cold drink. "So, General Mitchell, how's world domination coming along?" The teasing was new. My brothers had shifted from dismissive to almost reverent in the weeks following the revelation, before finally settling into a comfortable, respectful camaraderie. "On schedule," I replied with a small smile. "The invasion begins at dawn." He laughed, then grew more serious. "You know, I've been thinking about all those operations you must have run while we were deployed. Were you ever directing assets that were protecting us without our knowledge?" I maintained my professional discretion. "You know I can't discuss specific operations." "Which is an answer itself," he noted shrewdly. "It's strange to think my little sister might have been watching over me from some classified command center." "We all serve in our own ways," I said, repeating what had become something of a family mantra in recent months. Across the yard, I noticed Mom engaging a young neighbor girl in conversation. The teenager had recently expressed interest in cybersecurity, and Mom, who once would have steered any young woman toward nursing or more traditional military roles, was enthusiastically discussing educational pathways with her. Thomas joined us, his Air Force uniform replaced by civilian clothes since his recent transition to the reserves to pursue commercial aviation. "Dad's asking if you'll do the honors this year," he said, nodding toward the small memorial ceremony we traditionally held before dinner. In previous years, Dad had always led the remembrance, with my brothers sometimes taking part. I had never been asked to participate in any official capacity. "I'd be honored," I replied, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. As the family gathered around the small memorial stone in the corner of the yard, I felt a momentary nervousness that years of high-stakes briefings had never induced. Speaking to my family as a valued equal rather than the tolerated underachiever was still new territory. I kept the ceremony brief but heartfelt, acknowledging the visible and invisible sacrifices of service members. As I concluded, I caught Dad's eye. He nodded once, respect evident in his expression. Later, as we all helped clean up after dinner, Mom pulled me aside. "I've been wanting to ask you something," she said hesitantly. "All those years when I dismissed what you were doing, did that hurt you terribly?" The question was so direct, so unlike our family's typical approach to emotions, that it caught me off guard. "Yes," I admitted after a moment. "It did. But I understood." "You shouldn't have had to understand," she said firmly. "We should have trusted that you were finding your own path of service, even if it looked different than what we expected." Her acknowledgement was healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. Dad approached as we were talking, his attempt at casualness, belied by his military posture. "Rebecca, I've been meaning to ask, would you be willing to speak to my veterans group next month about intelligence work, whatever isn't classified? I think they would benefit from understanding that aspect of service better." The unspoken message was clear. He would benefit too. "I'd like that," I agreed. In the months that followed, our family dynamics continued to evolve. My brothers, who had once seen me as the odd Mitchell out, now sought my perspective on global events and security issues, respecting the boundaries of what I could and couldn't discuss. Alexander even requested a transfer to an intelligence liaison position, seeking to bridge the world of combat operations with the intelligence that supported them. Perhaps the most profound change was with Abigail. Her experience had transformed her view of military service. After recovering from her injuries, she applied for a position coordinating between infantry units and intelligence services, work that required understanding both worlds. "You've been straddling these worlds your whole career," she told me over coffee during one of our newly established monthly sister meetings. I never understood how difficult that must have been, or how much skill it required. "It gets easier with practice," I said. She looked thoughtful. "Does it bother you that they only respect you now because of your rank? That it took stars on your shoulder for them to see your value?" The question was insightful, cutting to a concern I had struggled with myself. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I think what they respect isn't just the rank. It's the revelation of who I've been all along. The rank just made them look closer." "Well, I respect you for all of it," she said firmly. "For doing vital work without recognition. For excelling when no one was watching. For protecting us even when we dismissed you." Her words meant more than any official commendation I had received. As I reflect on my journey from family disappointment to recognized success, I've realized that validation is a complex thing. External recognition feels good. I won't deny that hearing my father introduce me as "my daughter the general" fills me with a certain satisfaction. But the true victory wasn't in the stars or the title. It was in staying true to my path when no one understood its value. Perhaps the most valuable lesson is that worth isn't measured by others' understanding of your contribution. Sometimes the most important work happens in shadows, unrecognized and uncelebrated. The reward must come from within, from knowing the impact of your efforts, even when others cannot see it. I still run operations that will never make headlines. I still attend meetings where my name isn't recorded in the minutes. I still make decisions that protect lives in ways those lives will never know about. And I'm at peace with that, in a way I wasn't before. Because now I understand that recognition isn't the point. Service is. However you define it, whatever form it takes. So I ask you, what contribution are you making that goes unseen? What path are you walking that others might not understand or value? Trust that path. Honor your unique form of service, whether others recognize it or not. Because ultimately, true worth comes not from external validation, but from the integrity with which you pursue your purpose. If my story has resonated with you in any way, please share it with someone who might be feeling underestimated or misunderstood. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places, and leave a comment telling me about a time when you stayed true to your path despite lack of recognition. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, sometimes the most powerful impact is made by those whose contributions remain unseen. Stay true to your unique path of service, whatever form it takes,